Welcome to the Bluegrass Skeptic, everybody. Just want to do a podcast. Probably this will be the one for the week. My schedule's been really busy with the post office, with Amazon's sale coming up. So please don't go shopping on Amazon this week. I've got enough packages already been ordered to deliver, thanks to their little anniversary sale. I don't know if I can legally say that. Oh well. Oh shit. Oh well. I don't care. Anyway, so over the last, I guess, couple of weeks since we had the Supreme Court's ruling on gay marriage come down, I noticed there's been a lot of self-entitlement attitudes coming from the Christian majority in this country. And there's a couple points I'd like to make about it, so I'll try to not be droning on and kind of cut to the chase a little bit. First of all, Kentucky has been a wonderful example this week of this entitlement. The sense of, I'm special, the laws don't apply to me because of beliefs or whatever. And there's a lot of whatever going on this week. In particular, out of Casey County, Kentucky, we've kind of been making a lot of headline news with that. Casey Davis is the clerk of courts down there. He's in charge of making sure marriage licenses get distributed, sold, registered, all that good stuff. And since the ruling came down and the governor's even made it clear, hey, we got to start doing licensing for marriages, this guy won't do it. He just outright refuses. It's against his beliefs. In fact, I think he had told one of the news stations up there, I think it was an NBC affiliate, that he felt like nature's laws supersedes anything that, we decide to make a law. Which, it's weird that he used the word nature. Because I guess he's hinting at homosexuality is unnatural, therefore, even though there's consent involved, doesn't matter. It's against biological nature, therefore biological law supersedes whatever we come up with. Yeah. Which is kind of ironic because I'm not sure what form of nature he's talking about, unless he's just talking about strictly from a reproductive point of view. That's all I can think. He's not very clear in his reasoning. On top of all of that, he had a sit down with the governor, Bashir, this week as well. And the governor made it clear you either need to start issuing licenses or you need to resign. And the governor actually had to tell this to 2 other different counties. There are 3 counties out of, I think we got like 120 counties. 3 are refusing to issue marriage licenses to anybody. To kind of get around their conscience about supporting gay marriage unwillingly. So anyway, that's what you got going on with that. And it's funny because this guy, he was just like, he can't quit his job because he's got a mortgage to pay, but he won't do his job. And then on top of that, I think he wants the government to accommodate his beliefs. And he suggested that maybe a workaround would be to have where everybody applies online for licensing, since that's where we get like our hunting licensing and fishing and all of that stuff. The fact that he's going to say a marriage license is uncomplicated as a hunting or fishing license is kind of surprising. I mean, they have to verify your previous marriages if they're over and all of this other stuff. I mean, somebody's going to have to give that rubber stamp of approval. There's not an automated system to do it. And if they did make an automated system, that's well exceeding what's required out of the Civil Rights Act, Title VII of 1964. I mean, yes, an employer needs to accommodate within reason, without undue burden. And this guy's definitely putting out an undue burden onto his employer to accommodate his beliefs. This is something where he's going to lose his job, and he's probably not going to get any unemployment either. he needs to step up or shut up and move on and let someone else come in and do his job, because there are plenty of people that are glad to work. You know, they'll be glad to take his spot. But yeah, there's just this extremely entitled sense to marriage and legal recognition of said marriage. It's weird. I mean, I had one guy, there was a comment the other night, this guy was going on about how the leftists are trying to destroy religion. This isn't about redefining marriage or equality, or we'd be happy with just civil unions. It doesn't need to be marriage. He's focusing on the word, the ceremonial religious rite of marriage. And I, as I pointed out to him, and I'm sure he already knew, marriage is not a new concept. The concept itself has been around, oh gosh, for way too long. You know, well prior to the documented Christianity rites of marriage that are out there today, that's popular around the world. And I don't think he'll argue this point, but his attitude is that we're trying to destroy the religious rite, R-I-T-E, rite of marriage. And I had to tell the guy, and I did, that really, if he has to blame anybody for the destruction of how precious and you know, very dogma specific the term marriage is, then he needs to blame it on his own flock, his own ministries prior to him, you know, from a couple hundred years ago. He wanted to argue, you know, we didn't put marriage into the Constitution, the Supreme Court did. And I think we all know that's a straight up bullshit statement right there. The only reason why marriage has ever been brought into the Constitution, it's the same reason why slavery was brought into the Constitution, among other things. And that's because people challenged the definition or application of these particular, you know, topics or rights. And the court had to, interpret what the law said regarding those things. The Supreme Court never put any of this stuff into the Constitution. The people that challenged these topics did. They had to be addressed and have the constitutional law applied. He didn't think about that. But like I said, though, ultimately, when you take a religious rite, whatever you want to call it, process, and you put it into government, especially our kind of government where we have to accommodate many different races, cultures, gender, you know, all of this stuff, you can't keep it in that dogmatic definition and application any longer, because it's applying to an entire nation. Those who insisted on tying a religious rite in with a federal process are the ones who fucked up here. They're the ones that watered down just how special and unique this is to Christianity. They cannot keep the Christian trademark on it any longer. It just won't work. And this guy, I think, kind of let go of the argument when I brought that up, because it's just the fact of the matter. You know, it's like Sharia law in a way. You know, nobody, since when do we get to put religious law into the federal government and subsidize it with tax benefits, legal recognition? I mean, the polygamists don't get that luxury. They have to go to their church and have the church recognize their multiple wives, but the feds will only recognize one wife. So, I mean, really, they can't complain here. They really did this to themselves. This was eventually going to happen at some point. And it's not that it's really being destroyed. It's just being adapted for the rest of the population. This is why you can't go, oh, well, now we want to take it back and make it all ours. You know, if that's really how they want to be and say we can only apply it to this certain group of people and no one else can qualify, but we want it to be federal, then I say we need to just outlaw marriage altogether. Everybody go get their little civil union contracts as needed, and if you want to have a right recognized by a church, knock yourself out. but leave the federal government out of the whole rights process. Leave the government out of giving you the tax subsidies. Leave the government out of, whatever that has to do with this particular religious side of things. This is not the leftists destroying the rites and ceremony of marriage. The Christians did that to themselves 2 centuries ago when they decided that they would have governmental recognized marriages based on one man, one woman, and all of this other crap that was part of their dogma. Okay? And that's something we just don't do in this country anymore. Dogma is not the rule of the land. You don't get to have theocratical law apply to the general population in that theocratical manner. It just doesn't work like that in this country. And that's a good thing. So, yeah, there was a lot of entitlement that I was reading about. And it really was just kind of mind-boggling at first. And I think when they go on about how things are being destroyed and how our ilk are out there to destroy the core of the American family, they don't recognize how we're basically broadening the American family. We're strengthening it. Especially with these, the LGBTQ communities, couples that adopt these children that they give shelter to. There's so many kids that need homes, and you would think it's a good thing, but for some reason, no, it's all about we're destroying. We're not, they don't see it as an adaptation so that everybody gets an equal playing field. It's more than just equal, it's a just playing field. So anyway, that's what's been going on in Kentucky. They've been a wonderful example of what not to be doing religiously, I think. Hugely so. And essentially, they're the authors of their own destruction. And I guess they're going to have to live with it. They're either going to have to say, okay, fine, marriage is no longer a Christian-only brand because we tied it in with the feds, or they're going to have to take it back and we need to outlaw that shit altogether. And there's no more of this one man, one woman. They can do all of that in their own ceremony and believe whatever they want, but federally, it's just going to be a secular contract. And that, I think that might be more appropriate anyway. I really, really do. We don't need to have our judges in the middle of this kind of stuff. That's not what they're supposed to be there for anyway. But let's see. What else is going on this week? Good stuff. I tell you, good stuff. I'm sure some of you have been reading the headlines about pastors wanting to fly Christian flags higher than the American flag as an act of civil disobedience. I found that rather amusing. I guess they think the flag code is more than just the flag code. You won't get tickets. You might get frowned at, but it's not really that much of an act of civil disobedience to fly the Christian flag above the American one. And on the subject of flags, I'm sure some of you saw the big ceremony today. Stars and Bars finally came down in North Carolina. I was very happy to see that happen. It can go to the museum where it belongs. Sayonara. I had some people do the typical argument of how it's not racist, it's not all these excuses, but really I look at the history of that battle flag. It's not even the Confederate flag. It's just a battle flag that generally used, I think, briefly. But when they claim heritage, I'm thinking, can you explain to me what heritage you're talking about? Sweet tea, drinking moonshine out of jars, cotton fields and slaves. I mean, what is history? And a lot of folks are associating the rebel flag, if you want to call it that, with today's country culture, not that of the South, really. I mean, really, they're not. They're trying to act like it's completely not that any longer. But I don't think if those of us with German heritage were to put, Nazi flags outside our houses, it would be very much appreciated. I think that some folks are being very disingenuous in their arguments You know, they want to change what the meaning of that flag is to accommodate today's culture. But the problem is that you can't do that. There's so much with that flag. It's more than just it was the Civil War and the majority of those that seceded from the Union were wanting to fight because they could no longer keep slavery intact to keep their economy running. I'm sorry, but North Carolina also used that flag as a political statement during the Civil Rights Movement. I think they put that flag up on the State House. I think it was 1962. Okay? Recent history. Kind of like when we added Under God to the pledge in the 50s during the Red Scare. It was very much a very nasty political statement when they brought that flag up in South Carolina, and it was long overdue to go back down. Now, there's some folks who are like, oh, well, maybe this will usher in some peace, and now we can put racism to an end. And come on, folks. Seriously. This isn't a huge step at all. This is something that was long fucking overdue to be done to begin with. I can't sit here and give everybody gold stars for doing a good job for taking down a bad flag that should never been up in the fucking first place. Okay? You can't tell me the folks back in the day didn't know that this was going to be perceived as something very insulting and nasty. So yeah, that's where I stand on the whole Confederate flag. I mean, fly it in your home, wear it on your truck, wear it on your shirt, tattoo it across your ass. I don't fucking care, okay? Knock yourself out. But we do not need this flag on state buildings. It's just not appropriate. Some folks are like, oh, they're going to try and take them off the Confederate soldier monuments. You know, I don't agree with that. I think they should stay on the Confederate soldier monuments. That's fine by me. Put a white flag on top of every gravestone as well, you know, if you want. It's just one of those things that you got to divide history from political statement. And I don't think leaving the stars and bars intact on monuments of Confederate soldiers from the 1860s and so on, I don't think that's inappropriate. You know, it shows what they were fighting for, even if we don't agree with it. Whereas, I mean, it's grave markers, but when you got this thing on a state building where you have tourists coming through, foreign nationals come through, it's a state building, people. Come the fuck on. This is not rocket science on this level. This is just common etiquette, okay? So let's just get over it already. We're not saying your heritage is destroyed. And if there's some stores that don't want to sell them anymore, that's on them. Let them make that decision. That's the whole point of business as far as what products they're going to sell to the public. You know, that's their choice. And if they realize they're not going to lose any money for it, and they feel like they're putting out a good message of, I don't know, anti-discriminatory behavior, knock yourself out. You know, we need to encourage that in our youth, because that's ultimately where racism is going to end, is with our youth. Okay, this will probably be my last topic I'm going to discuss. It has to do with the, I'm going to guess how to pronounce this, Issachar training, Issachar training, that has to do with an NPR article I had read earlier this morning. If you want to find the article, you'll just need to go to npr.org. It's in the political news section. Pastors eye a move from God's house to the state house. Basically, there's a pastor, he's running like a workshop, so to speak, to train pastors how to push political messages in their church. I'm assuming in ways that will still help them keep their, nonprofit classification. I'm trying to figure out how this one's going to work here, because, I mean, he makes it very clear. One, he wants to push everybody to vote, and they need to vote biblically. Blah, blah, blah. I can't even pronounce that freaking word tonight. Probably from the beer. Well, anyway, he wants you to be very biblical in the way you decide to cast your votes. He wants to make sure that people understand the issues according to the way God does, not according to the way our country operates, which basically he's saying push disinformation and inaccurate details is what he's saying. And then he also wants to make sure he gets everybody registered to vote, which I'll never say no to that, ever. Because I know when in my days of church going, there were plenty of people that did not agree with the pastor. Plenty of them. You know, they might not say that out loud, but when you're in that voting booth on your own, you can vote your conscience because there's not a pastor there to look over your shoulder and make you decide. But this one particular pastor, I think his last name's Lane, he's saying we really don't want any of our pastors to run, but we're letting them know if they have a calling from God to run that they should, which is kind of contradictory in itself. I just don't know if he understands there's already God in politics. I mean, it's constantly in politics. Tons of senators. I don't know if it's just he feels that we really need to have pastors in there. Because last I checked, we've got former pastors in there, and we have a lot of senators that, you know, lead church prayer events and everything else, as I recall. Who was it that did that? I think Senator Cruz, or maybe it was Huckabee. I can't remember. But it's one of those things, though, this gentleman is very much emphasizing evangelical values, which also means end times, which sounds like warmongering to me. Lots of fear. And I don't think we need that in politics. We already have fear in politics. Lots of fear. But his attitude is, if we can't win, you know, all of our issues the way we want to win, which is no abortion and no gay marriage and all this other stuff, then we need to be in politics and we'll just bully our way through. That's how he sees it. They really feel they've been bullied. So I don't think there's too much to worry about as this goes. These folks just aren't meant for political realms. I don't see them ever really getting anywhere. Not in the major light. Now, the folks you need to worry about are the ones who get in on the local level. Your city councils, your county, you know, administrators and judges. These folks could get into those positions, and that can cause a headache county by county, city by city. These are things you need to worry about. This is the more pervasive way to get out and be active in your community government, to push things the way you want to push. We have folks doing this in the, the voting committees, you know, the poll locations and all of that. A lot of these folks who are on those committees to decide polling locations, opening them up sooner or later, you know, they rig these things to be open during specific hours so they can only get a certain type of demographic in on purpose. These folks are the ones who are motivated at church and push their efforts and personal beliefs by affecting legislation on the local levels. This is where you need to push back. On the national level, I don't think they're going to ever pose much of a threat. They've always been a problem on the state and, you know, county and city levels. This is where you need to be involved and be worried. This is where you can bust these people for pushing political agenda on church time. That way then they have to pay taxes. So anyway, that's my couple of cents on that. And finally, later this week, I'm going to be writing up some very, leftist economy ideas. You know, it's funny. I was really getting irritated the other night. If any of you had seen a dialogue I gotten into with a Christian over the whole Supreme Court legislating when, the Supreme Court doesn't legislate. People bring up challenges or questions to the court to interpret according to the Constitution, and then the answers that they get from the court, they then go back to their states, and the legislators there legislate according to the answers that they receive. This gentleman didn't get that. he went on a rant about the 10th Amendment and the federal government's not supposed to be doing this, or this, and it's on the states. And it's like he totally forgot that there's the 14th Amendment that has due process and covers, marriage and everything else, He totally forgot it was an entire body of work. But it's interesting, though, because he kept calling me a leftist, or your ilk, or you people. And it's funny. I really was offended by that last night, because I try to see myself as human. I'm your peer. I'm not a different species. I'm still human. I'm still a citizen. We just don't agree. But he was very divisive, needless to say. And it's hilarious because when I think about leftist, anymore I'm thinking to describe me as a leftist, because that's somebody who's usually concerned about the greater good, making sure everybody's kind of got a somewhat fair standard of at least living. And I'm thinking, that kind of puts me pretty close to being called Jesus. Why don't you just say I'm being a Jesus? I would love to go and, chase money changers out of Congress with a 9-tail and, cause a ruckus. I could see myself doing that. I could totally go with being referred to as Jesus, because that's basically my views, I guess. But I have an even more Jesus-y attitude when it comes to economy and all of that. And it's thanks to someone I've been seeing. I've always had an attitude of, I think government should make up the difference for those who struggle, not just for those who are below the poverty line, but those who are at poverty or even slightly above it, And there's going to be some very interesting essays I'm going to be writing this coming week about economy, and it's not going to be my usual, secular type of deal, because it's economy stuff. But it kind of ties in with the secular community, because I think we'd be semi more open to it. But also we'll kind of examine how we have this whole, you have to sacrifice something in order to gain attitude in this country, and how that's actually a detriment. And we need to have faith in each other, so to speak, and understand that in general, if you invest in your country's people, you'll get a return for the future, and how important it is we need to start investing in ourselves. So anyway, that'll be something coming up probably on Monday. And I really look forward to hearing everybody's comments on that, because I have a feeling it's going to rile a few feathers. I know quite a few atheists out there who almost have a Republican kind of attitude about those who get assistance, and, they're mooching and yada yada. And I'm going to try and demonstrate the fundamental flaws with our welfare system and how we could change this around. So I do hope you stay tuned in for that later on this week. And I hope I didn't make you fall asleep listening to my ranting tonight, which was kind of low-key, obviously, because it's late. I didn't want to wake up the neighbors. But talk to y'all next time. Bye.